children. I'm in that club too, the Grief Mothers Club. Um, Happy Mother's Day to you all who maybe your children don't even talk to you, you know. Maybe they've grown up and moved on, or maybe you're going to have an excellent Mother's Day. And maybe you're not a physical mother at all where you've given birth to a child, but maybe you just have mothering instincts. You know, I know men that have taken on both roles as a mother and the father. So just happy recognition of those whoever and whatever you nurture. I don't know if I need that light on there or not. Boy, it's just only in one thing, isn't it? Anyway, yeah. So happy Mother's Day to everyone. Today we're going to be finishing up the week. We've talked about ACE, and I've got to hurry because I'm going to breakfast this morning with one of my friends and her family for Mother's Day. Good morning, Ramon. How are you this day? You getting some quiet Ramon time? Manga. Well, I'm going to get to go to breakfast, so I'm going to get started here pretty soon. Thank you for being here. We're going to finish up this week. On Sundays, I finished up the week with the kind of the stories. Look at you. You got the hearts going on. Look at y'all. Thank you. Thank you. I see the hearts. So we're finishing out the week where we've talked about this ACE evaluation, the adverse childhood experience, you know, for adults, that test for adults. Because sometimes we don't know. We think that the world's just happening to us. Dawn, thank you. I have Grinch in his house, and Grinch has to stay in the house because I don't want Grinch. Thank you for the hearts. I don't want Grinch getting out pooping on me because I'm going to breakfast. I'm going out in public this morning. And also Grinch doesn't even like to let me get ready to go out. You know, Grinch will start fighting with me. He sure will. Kim, is that you? Well, thank you, darling. I'm going out with one of my friends and her family and going to have breakfast this morning. So I'm going to get started here pretty soon because I've got a long list to go through and then our story. So I'll get started. Thank you for being here. Kim, Dawn, and Ramon. Thank y'all. Thank you for the hearts. So we're going to get started because I got a lot to cover and I need to finish this by 10 minutes till 10 because I'm supposed to be at breakfast at 10. So here we grow. Here we grow. Thank you. So closing out our week with the ACEs, the childhood trauma, addiction, codependency, and the adventure back to ourselves. That's the best adventure we're ever going to take, y'all. I know that for me, I still am on this adventure because as long as I'm alive, kicking and breathing, I'm going to be on this adventure back to myself because these patterns were ingrained. It's so good to be here. I'm glad you can hear my voice, and I'm glad you're here this morning, Dawn, because hopefully this will help with something because I'm pulling everything from this week together. And so you've been here, but, you know, for me, my old tapes were reinforced. And sometimes then when I got into adulthood, what felt familiar only reinforced those tapes that I had learned with my imagination as a child to my adaptation to the world. So here we grow. So this week we spent time, and I've got my notes, and I'm you know, making sure that I give you the best, most information and an awesome story in the shortest amount of time. Thanks, Ramon. Well, thank you, Madshami. So we began with the ACEs test, which stands for the Adverse Childhood Experiences. And so the ACEs test helps to identify experiences from our childhood, such as addiction in the home, emotional neglect, physical or emotional abuse, mental illness in the household, domestic conflict or violence, abandonment, divorce, and instability, and emotional unpredictability. All of this trains our central nervous system, our autonomic system. Back in the day, I was a hot mess back in the day. Many of us did not grow up understanding how deeply these experiences could shape our nervous system's beliefs, identities, and our coping mechanisms, survival skills. We develop survival skills because as a child, you can't go anywhere. Thank you, Kim. You're the best. I am blessed that you're my friend and part of my team. So Children personalize what happens around them. You know, when I got divorced, we went through these classes where they talked about don't talk about your ex-spouse because, you know, it causes your children to take that on because they identify. He got drunk last night and nearly fell over twice. I had all of those childhood, Stacy. I know, Dawn. I feel for you. I hope that these will help you continue to grow and glow because you are so worthy, valuable, and divine. The way that he behaves is an indication of who you are. Okay. So, y'all, I'm going to stay on topic here. Remember our things. We talk about what? We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion. And we don't talk about my age up in here. So when a child grows up in chaos, addiction, criticism, neglect, unpredictability, or emotional unavailability, the child doesn't think. We don't know what to think about all this. No one's there really, they're emotionally checked out. They cannot help us to identify our own feelings because oftentimes we're sucked into the drama. Your mom was divorced twice? Yes. Yeah. So there was probably chaos, trauma, and drama, and we think that that's the way that the world is, right? Because that's our experience. So a child often concludes something is wrong with me. A lot of times children, people that I've worked with were put on diets at like 8 and 11 years old. So they were already told, Grinch, my goodness, Grinch is chirping in. They were already told something is wrong with you. You know, and sometimes children were put in these special classes. They were told something is wrong with you. So they felt defective. Thank you, Ligmag. So something is wrong with me. These are what the child concludes. Something is wrong with me. I need to. Yes, I know, Don. I know. So hopefully this will help you to retrain because I had to retrain my brain because I took on this stuff too. So something is wrong with me. I need to be better. I need to stay smaller. I need to work harder. I need to take care of everyone. I need to be invisible. I cannot have needs. I'm not enough. I am too much. Now, my mother adored me, but my father, on the other hand, and somehow you would hope there's a balance in between, but it was a heavy duty imbalance because my mother tried to make up for my father, and then it just, we learn manipulation that way, right? Because I learned manipulation. So these beliefs are rarely consciously chosen. We don't choose those beliefs. That's what we think, because as a child, we don't know how to process thoughts and emotions. And our parents didn't get to learn how to process thoughts and emotions either, probably. These beliefs are, rarely consciously chosen. They're formed through repetition, emotional pain, and adaptation. That's why y'all see me on here saying the same thing for a week so that you can learn that it's not you. It's not you. It's just we need to heal from the things that we thought. I wasn't an ugly child and was kind, but I felt useless. I told my mom I knew my stepdad wasn't my dad. I felt it. Yeah. Children are very intuitive, but at the same time, they're trying to make sense of things that don't match their intuition. Because when you were born, you knew that you were holy and divine. You knew that there was nothing wrong with you when you were born. That's why we were like, "Hey, look at me, look at this." And kids do learn what they see. And sometimes parents were afraid that if a kid was themselves, then it would indicate that the parent didn't have control. So they buckled in more of that control. And sometimes that was very painful because the kid didn't get to be a kid. So they're formed through repetition, emotional pain, and adaptation. See, we adapt. It's in our nervous system because your autonomic system is automatic and you automatically learn these survival skills from what you didn't understand. So trauma is often what our mind, body, nervous system, and identity learn to do in response to what happened. I showed y'all this book and suggested this book by Oprah Winfrey and Bruce D. Perry, What Happened to You? Because when you go to the doctor, when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling certain ways, and you don't know how to identify those feelings, they say, what's wrong with you? So you still are telling people what's wrong with you. And I'm not saying those things aren't wrong with you. I'm just saying that the doctor is only treating the symptom. The doctor is not treating what happened to you. And sometimes what happened to us is what we think is wrong with us, that our perception. Your objective senses give you your perception, and what we see, hear, taste, touch, and smell reminds us of something else always. Sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive, but typically we're on guard for those negative things when we're trying to survive. So children adapt. A child in a chaotic home may become hypervigilant, that learning to adapt. So they can't even, sometimes as adults, we can't even enjoy peace. We don't know what peace looks like because we haven't recognized that we're living hypervigilantly from what happened in our past. So we're preparing for shit to happen in the future. And we think that that's intuition. You can see a broken bone. You can't see a broken mind. Yes, I talked about that this week, about when we have physical wounds, they can get infected if we don't do anything about them. When we have emotional wounds, they can be infected when we don't do anything about them. They're going to be projected in the infection. Thank you, Nia. We're talking about how the ACE test and childhood trauma today. I hope that this will be helpful and valuable to any of you who are here. So a child exposed to addiction may normalize chaos, right, Don? Unpredictability, emotional inconsistency, secrecy, and emotional suppression. Yeah, I know that was me. Thank you. I hope you're able to stay and that you can get something out of this topic today, because it's always about us being able to tune into our self, selves, and soul. Thank you, Kim. So a child who is criticized may become perfectionistic. If you were criticized growing up all the time, you may be afraid of doing something wrong. A child who is emotionally relied upon may become a caretaker. A child who is ashamed may become a performer, achiever, rebel, or class clown. A child who deals with shame, who is shamed. All of these are adaptive responses. Not flaws, not failures, not evidence that something is inherently wrong with us. They are often intelligent survival strategies. You are smart. I know that for me, I thought I wasn't smart. I didn't realize that I was living in survival strategies, because I thought that, how can I keep making these mistakes? How can I keep choosing these familiar circumstances? And it was because I haven't learned to conceive of a different way. I just thought in my head that I could just make things happen, that things would just get different if I thought for a minute differently. But I hadn't trained my central nervous system. And as I learned how to train my central nervous system, but for me, it was through Reiki, because I couldn't go to the doctor and get drugs because I'm an addict. I've got almost 29 years clean and sober. Hey, Mama. So I didn't go to the doctor. So through Reiki helped me a great deal to be able to stop twitching, because my central nervous system was jumpy. See, I didn't know I had a jumpy central nervous system. No one wants to think about a jumpy central nervous system, but I had a jumpy central nervous system, so I would be twitching. I would be doing things. All right. Kim says, hi, Mom, and happy Mother's Day. I'm sure you read that, but if you didn't, you've heard it. Kim and Mom are amazing. So all of those are adaptive responses. If you become the performer, the achiever, the rebel, the class clown, all of those are adaptive responses. They're not flaws. They're not failures even. Not evidence that something is inherently wrong with you. What it is they're often survival strategies. But what protects us in childhood can sabotage us in adulthood when we don't know what's going on. See, we didn't know in childhood what was going on, and we can still be in adulthood and not know what's going on. Don, I pushed it all to the back of my mind and tried to build bridges, but it didn't work. They kept talking about the divorce and bringing it up and caused me more trauma. Hey, Robbie, it's good to see you this morning. Don, yes. We have in the back of our mind, when we start learning what our body does, there's also the other book, The Body Keeps the Score. But when we start learning what our body does, we know that there's the amygdala in the back of our mind. When people are like, oh, it's in the back of my mind. Well, the amygdala is back there, and that's like your brain's garbage disposal, and sometimes we have stuff in the garbage disposal. We just don't know how to let go. So that's why I get on here and I always say, here we grow. because I want to give you information so that you don't think. So many of us walk around thinking, I'm less than, I'm not good enough, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, and all of these things that maybe somebody told you at one time, but nobody else gets to define you but you. So here we grow. Addiction is often the original problem. Okay. This is where we explored the connection between childhood trauma and addiction. Addiction is, the original problem, but addiction frequently shows up as a strategy. See, people in addiction, whatever it is, it's not just drug addiction, it's not just alcohol addiction. This is how we learn to cope. Sometimes children who grow up in chaos, they are addicted to chaos because if things get peaceful, I'm so happy you're happy today, Aaron. And we all have this God seed in us. It's Arian. So this is why I have notes, y'all. This is why I have notes. So it just becomes a strategy. So a strategy to I was talking about addiction. That's what it was. Sometimes we learned food. Food is the most acceptable addiction that there is because when we're happy, we celebrate with food. When we're sad, we grieve with food. And so we were oftentimes, when people say I'm stuffing my emotions, food might have become addiction, when we didn't feel comfortable feeling our feelings. So the things that we say when we learn to listen to them, they can give us some leeway into what happened to us, what's going on with us. Thank you, Rayer. I appreciate that. And Pick and Grin, thank you. I appreciate that. So the addiction can be and sometimes there's transference of addiction. I talk about that because I know for me it was food, then drugs, then love, codependency, alcohol, and then it was shopping. It's like, because we will try to seek relief from our feelings, our thoughts and our feelings. We will try to seek relief, and we call this living in default when we haven't recognized when something isn't working for us, when something is actually sabotaging us. We've learned to blame other people, but blaming other people won't empower ourselves. Oh, Rayer, I'm going to breakfast this morning. One of my friends and her family are taking me to breakfast. Thank you. Yes, the mobile phone is a huge addiction too. Games are a huge addiction. People, there's a lot of huge addictions out there. Thank you, Robbie. Hola, Trevor. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. De nada. So addiction frequently becomes a strategy to numb, a strategy to soothe, a strategy to escape, a strategy to regulate overwhelming feelings or internal pain. I don't know who Kay McGrath is. Yes, Don. There's a lot of people addicted to phones. Yes. That's the thing is usually on Sundays, like after this, you won't see me on social media very much, or you won't see me on the phone. And after 8, 9 o'clock at night, I am not chit-chatting with folks. I stay in my business after 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night. I'm getting rested, getting ready to go to sleep. 5 Elements Infinity. Hello, good day to you. It's good to see you this morning. All right. So for some, this looks like alcohol or substances, but for others, it may become like I listed before. Thank you. What Kate Hanau. Is that Hawaiian? Happy Mother's Day. Thank you very much. So for others, it may become shopping, food. Work is an addiction too. My dad would transfer to work addiction. I've probably been guilty of transferring to work addiction. Relationships, sex, chaos, overachievement, control, caretaking, and people pleasing. Isn't that a lovely list? And none of us want to claim that stuff, but we have to name it, claim it, bless it, and let it go. Because we can't heal from it if we can't name it. If we're blaming somebody else, we're not naming it. So compulsive behaviors can become ways we attempt to regulate what was never properly soothed or emotionally processed. I got a nail messing up now. This is why simply removing a substance or behavior is not enough. That was for me. I thought once I quit drinking, I was going to be normal. And I was not normal once I quit drinking. In fact, I had more insecurity because I didn't have no liquid security. So I had more insecurity when I quit drinking. So this is why simply removing a substance or behavior is often not enough. That's why I switched to shopping then, because it's trying to find something to make me feel like enough. So far, so good, 5 elements. It's pretty early. It's only 9:15 here, and I've got to run through this because I need to be done like at 9:50. So here we grow. Compulsive behaviors can come ways we attempt to regulate what was never properly soothed or emotionally processed. Like I said, this is why simply removing the substance or behavior is not enough. Without deeper healing, many people experience deep, addiction transfer. One coping strategy is removed and another quickly takes its place. That's what happened to me. One of my friends in recovery calls it the whack-a-mole, where you're playing that game and you're trying to hit all these characters jumping up. And we talked about characters this week, as in the characters and the roles that we learn to play in the family to be safe, to be accepted, to be loved. So why were we doing these coping strategies was because the underlying pain, the belief systems, the nervous system patterns, and emotional wounds remain active. They don't just go away because we get adult physical bodies. There's these inner child, and what if we were just put on this earth to heal these inner child feelings? Some people may believe that it comes from a past life, that we are always evolving and incarnating, and so sometimes maybe it's that. Maybe it's through you have in your cerebral spinal fluid is the amniotic fluid from when you were a child, when you were born. You don't get much of the amniotic fluid, but when they cut that umbilical cord, some of the amniotic fluid is still in there. So all this genetic stuff can also pass through. Also in the DNA is a mysterious thing. So I'm always hoping that what I heal in myself gets to heal those others, whether they're on this plane or the spiritual plane, because they were all growing through it too. So many people are surprised to learn that trauma does not only show up as addiction. It often shows up in our relationships, what we will accept and tolerate in relationships. Sometimes we stay way past those expiration dates, right, Dawn, and whoever else, Okay. So it shows up in relationships, anxiety, people pleasing, perfectionism. I've done a lot of these things. Conflict avoidance, emotional shutdown. That was my favorite one. I was always going to shut down and sulking, passive aggressive. Low self-esteem, criticism, fear of abandonment, overthinking, hyperindependence, inability to rest, and attraction to emotionally unavailable partners. In that emotional shutdown, I was actually trying to control somebody. And actually, sometimes when we're trying to control people, we were actually repelling people. So we were trying to get control and it repulses people. And I did that. And that's not fun to own. But if I couldn't own it, I couldn't quit that behavior. I talked to somebody earlier this week. I think it was Saturday. I had a meeting with a client. We were talking about amends. And amends isn't just saying I'm sorry. Amends is when we're, need to correct a behavior, because we learned how to say I'm sorry sometimes just to feel safe. We learned to say I'm sorry just to pacify somebody so they'll get off our butt. But knowing what we did wrong helps us to not do the same behavior over, because a lot of us get frustrated with people and we accept that kind of behavior when somebody just says, I'm sorry, and blows us off. Sometimes they'll accuse you of the same behavior that you're afraid of. So it's about this projection and deflection. When you get to know yourself and trust yourself is when we get to own our own, because we all have negative and positive traits. We all do, but a lot of us are trying to hide those because of this childhood trauma. So we explored common survival identities, such as this is like who we learn to be safe, and the different, I always tell y'all, I'm not telling you to become anyone else, not the person you're becoming. I'm trying to help you to return to who you were when you were born, because you've already become all these people. Let me read you this list. If you were trying to people please and to fit in different places, as you've become the peacemaker, the perfectionist, the rebel, the caretaker, the achiever, the invisible one, the comedian. Each of these roles once served a purpose. Yes, Robbie, just telling them what they want to hear. Before I lost my son, sometimes, I would catch him telling people of authority certain things, and he would tell me, I'm just telling them what they want to hear. Because he knew he was brilliant. We are brilliant. We will learn how to manipulate. So each of these roles served a purpose. Each helped a child survive emotionally. It helped us to survive at the time, but several patterns are not always sustainable pathways for adult intimacy or peace or emotional health. See, we might not have seen mirrored emotional health. We might not have seen that. We might have seen things falling apart, and we tried to fix it by becoming those characters or learning to become a rescuer. Raxter, you were a crybaby when you were born. Don, you never got apologies. I was always a very sensitive child from a baby. Yeah. And children, we as children are so connected. I believe we are so connected to source, whoever you perceive that to be. Like I said, this isn't a religious channel, but our imaginations are very powerful. The problem is when we had to learn to survive, adjust, and adapt, we didn't get to live in our truth. So we also discussed a powerful truth this week. Sometimes peace feels uncomfortable. Many people raised in chaos do not immediately experience peace as safe. Stillness can feel suspicious, calm can feel unfamiliar, and healthy relationships can feel boring, like we just can't connect, like we don't have a connection. It's because maybe if you're like me, I was having to hide so much of myself. If somebody seemed half-ass healthy, you know what I mean? I would be like, I don't know if I fit in here. So I couldn't fully authentically be myself because I just couldn't fully authentically be myself. I had to expose my dark sides to myself so that I could see the light side to myself so that I could feel whole, because that is what whole is being able to understand that I am not perfect, and that's okay. I don't have to be perfect. Babies pick up things and hear and feel in the womb. They do. That's what I was saying, through that amniotic fluid that turns to cerebral spinal fluid. Now, when we do our breathing, what that does is it releases that cerebral spinal fluid. A lot of these thoughts that we hold in the back of our mind in that human garbage disposal get to be released. And hopefully, I always tell people to envision it going out with the waste, because they don't serve us anymore. So stillness can feel suspicious, calm can feel unfamiliar, and healthy relationships can feel boring, not because we want dysfunction. None of us say, sign me up for some dysfunction, but because familiarity and safety are not always the same. See, we may feel familiar. We feel like we connect because we have energy to us. When we're talking about positive and negative traits, see, when people first meet people at first, our positive energies are connected to each other. But then what? 3 months later, what happens? If you're like me, 3 months later, our negative energies are repelling. So we live in this electromagnetic field, and that's the reality of everything. So the nervous system often chooses what's familiar before it knows what's healthy. This week, we also explored emotional maturity. Recovery is not only about stopping behaviors. Recovery is about learning new ways to relate to ourselves, others, emotions, and life. Getting all these textures of life. Mom and dad split when you were 2. And sometimes we want to stay locked and loaded. That's a bad thing. And like one of my spiritual teachers taught me, sometimes when we got this, some of us might have wished our parents would have split when they were 2. My mom and dad stayed fighting for 20 years, right, Mom? So they fought for 20 years. So it's like, I used to pretend my parents were divorced. Mom didn't know that. When I'd like, yeah, because they needed to be probably, but it was all good. We had love as much as love, but a lot of times we don't know about the love that we did have until we heal the perception of that, the things that happened that confused us. And they did happen. We just didn't learn how to process it. And we can process it now, or we can process it later, or we can process it never. But what if it does come back in the next life? I had a friend, one of my girls that I was working with. You're so welcome, Shaliran Naranja. Some people shouldn't be married in the first place. I know, but back in the day, they used to think people needed to get married as youngsters, and they did. They did. And so we weren't fully developed, and we didn't know we weren't fully developed because our bodies seemed to be fully developed. I know when I was 14, I used to stand up to my dad, and he'd be saying, "Kid, you're wet behind the ears." And I would get mad at him, and I would think, he's full of shit. But you know what? Sometimes our kids can be older than 14 and we can think they're wet behind the ears so that they don't know what we've gone through, what we've grown through. One of my best friends, my best friend actually, she's like, "Stacy, I love you so much. I'm so glad that I got to know you because here's Mom's Day." And a lot of kids, a lot of our children that even are grown, think that our whole role in life is to be their mom. They don't realize we had a life before they were born and then after they're born. And they tend to want to judge us for the life that we live after they were born. I mean, after they've grown up and gone out of the house, that they still have us in this role model. And she said, "Stacy, I'm so glad that I get to know you because I get to know that you are a real person and that you have a life. Your role is not just mom, you know?" So pray my husband and children blessing. I do pray your husband and children blessing. Thank you, Shalaran. Naranja, okay, so let me catch up. So did my mom and dad, but loved each other till death. My parents had a way. They divorced finally after 20 years, and then my mom was the one who found my dad when he did pass. Don, yes. Yes, I was fighting with my dad. I made my dad break a showcase in the donut shop. I made my dad push me up against a wall by my neck. But I was talking crazy. I have to admit, I was talking crazy. I was baiting him, you know. So anyway, recovery is about learning new ways to relate to ourselves, others, emotions, and life. Many trauma survivors develop protective defenses. Some become emotionally guarded. Some become hyper independent. Some develop what I call protective arrogance. That's our invisible force field about you can't hurt me. And some protective arrogance is not true confidence. It's often a defense against shame, vulnerability, uncertainty, rejection, or emotional exposure. So healing asked us to move from protection into awareness, from defensiveness into observation, from reactive patterns into emotional responsibility. I did this because, not you made me do this. I did this because. Because what we learn is when we do this healing work is that everyone, instead of thinking it's all about me, everyone's doing what they do because that's what they do. I do not have control over anybody. No amount of aggressiveness, no amount of passive aggressiveness, no amount of manipulating can make people do what I wanted them to do. And half the time, did I even know what I wanted them to do? I had an idea in my mind, but I didn't really know what that idea looked like. So from reactive patterns into emotional responsibility, from protective arrogance into teachable humility. See, arrogance is when we think that I've got to know something. A lot of times we're asked questions by certain people, and before we can even answer, they've already answered the question for us. We're usually in a codependent relationship when that happens because there's no way that I will let people nowadays tell me what I think and how I feel. But I used to, and then I would just sulk. That was my codependency. That's what codependency looks like. If anybody wonders, what does codependency look like? So it wasn't humiliation, not self-rejection, humility, the willingness to listen. I had to be willing to listen to other people, to repeat back to me what I said, because sometimes we would think I'm justifiable in twisting off. But when we tell somebody else who has a controlled nervous system and they say, did you know you sounded like this when you said that? I have made oil men out in the oil field go talk to my boss because I sometimes I think something and I just say it immediately. I've had to learn how to temper that because when you're a child and you're not heard, oftentimes it's us that's talking crazy sometimes. And so we may just say something. I did this in the oil field and this man went and told my boss. I had to go in the boss's office and have a talk. And she said, "Stacy, I understand you're like me. You think something and you say it." And it wasn't even his character, but what I would say, my tonality would be calling people a dumbass, the way I said things. And I'm not proud of that, but I have to own it because sometimes when people tell you the way that you said this sounds like this, maybe we need to listen. And that's humility. That's part of being teachable. The idea of what to do in life keeps changing for me. One day it is X to 10, and 10 days later I'm bored of it. That's a journey. That's an adventure, though, Naraja. There's nothing wrong with that. There was a parenting one. I know. I sent somebody this morning a thing that we come as moms, not as manuals. We don't have manuals for this thing. Thank you, Robbie. I'm going back in the comments. Thank you so much, Naraja. Thank you for that happy Mother's Day wish. Okay, I caught up on the comments. Now I'm going to get back into the notes. I wish that I had that calmness, but they keep triggering me and catch me off guard. Breathe, darling, breathe. That helped me a great deal. When I first went into therapy, I had to learn to breathe. I had to learn to not should on myself, because I don't know about y'all, but I would be like, I should have said this. I should have said that. I should have done this. I should have done that. Shoulding is shaming. So let's quit shoulding on ourselves. Robbie, I made my dad show me tough loves too. I'm sure frustrated love breaks us. Frustrated love for us kids back then. I know, right? So the willingness to listen, observe, stay curious, and pause before reacting. Pause before reacting. This is what humility does for us. To ask. This isn't about taking other people's stuff on. It's to ask, not to be defensive, and to just think. When my therapist told me and my boss told me, Stacy, it sounds like you're saying blah, 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 dumbass. Because I would be stating a fact, but it would come out in that tonality. And, I had heard that tonality. And so that's where I learned the tonality. It wasn't just like I said, I was thinking to myself, I'm going to call them a dumbass, because that's certainly not at all what I said. But that is the tone that I learned to use when I was explaining something. And it wasn't a healthy tone. You're trying the box breathing method? Yes. Now, when we breathe at the end, if you breathe at the end with us, I only have us counting the 4 counts, because I want us to actually feel, so when we only count the 4 counts when we hold it in. But yes, that's a good breathing technique. I know, imaginary comebacks. I know, that's when I got into therapy, though. My therapist would say, what could you have said differently when I pissed somebody off? She'd say, what could you have said differently? And I would think, and I didn't know, because that's the thing, that's why I get on here, because we don't know until we know. And I didn't know what I could have said differently, because that's the thing about parenting. That's the thing about everything that we do. If we would have known differently, we would have done differently for our regrets. So in recovery, we have a saying that I will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it, because that way we are humble and we remember where we can go. I know that I was a piece of work back in the day in my addiction. I know I was a piece of work. I've done my inventory, and I can say, oh, I look at when I'll be thinking, oh, la, 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 la. Then if I ever, work on myself in my inventory, it's like, ooh, I was a piece of work. I don't want to return to that. So I have to remember, I know what I'm capable of. That's what's kept me sober for almost 29 years, is I know what I am capable of. Narasha, the imaginary comeback. Okay, Don, my brother never even went to see my mom's and dad's funeral. Dysfunctional family. I know, girl, there's some dysfunctional families out there. My family got called putting the funk in dysfunctional. And that is sad, because so many people spend so much time being angry at people instead of healing themselves. And it's not to say that he would need to do that, because if he didn't see them when they were alive, I know some people will be like, they didn't see me when I was alive. They don't need to see me now, And that's an importance of when we learn to embrace our own lives and to feel important in our own lives and to play our own roles in our own lives, to decide who I'm going to be, not who I have to become to survive. Then we get to live life fully and wholly. WHOLLY. So humility is, like I said, I'm going to read that just right quick, because I've got like only 20 minutes. Yes, Grinch. So the willingness to listen, observe, stay curious, pause before reacting, and to ask, what am I feeling? What's happening in my body? And what is true right now? Am I responding to the present or reacting from an old wound? Was I regretful of my past life? If yes, how did I move on? I do have regrets. But what I did was I acknowledged my part in them. but I don't shut the door on my past life. You know, I know who I am. That's the thing, is I live with all these colors and textures, and it's okay. I'm not ashamed of my past. I'm not ashamed of it. I get on here and tell y'all about my past all the time. And it came from just trusting one person, because I couldn't save my face and my ass at the same time. And I grew up with alcoholism and addiction, and I didn't want to be that for my children. And so, do they appreciate my son? I lost him to addiction. Did they appreciate that? Does it change the world? No. And when I first got sober, it was just to, when I first got sober, it was just to, to keep my kids safe, because I didn't know what I would do when I was drinking. Sometimes it would be okay, sometimes not so much. And so, but later, thankfully, after working on my codependency, when I did lose a child and he was using, I didn't take that personally. You know, he was using because he was allowed to use. He was, and I didn't allow him to use, but he was using because that's what he wanted to do. That was his way of coping. And he told me himself, Mom, because I tried to get him help. He told me, Mom, if I want to use, there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm like, I knew this. You know, that was one of his favorite sayings. One of his quotes is, I know this. I know this. He was very brilliant and good looking and had it all going. But addiction doesn't care who you are, where you come from, and what you have. It does not care. It will tear you apart, whether it's food or any of the other things that I named above. Robbie, forgiving is better than hating, being the more mature thinker. Yes, we talked about emotional maturity last week. They did help me. My children saved my life. My daughter's not real thrilled. She didn't like that. She sometimes felt abandoned that I went to meetings. I think she wasn't always real thrilled. She's not, there's times when she's been happy that I was sober. I'm happy because I got to be there, because I know what the other side of that would have been. Had I not gotten sober, I would not have been there all those years. Even, when you lose a child, at least I was there. I was emotionally present and available. And that was something for my daughter. I was more present and available than she probably remembers. And I wouldn't have been at all, for that addiction, it's jails, institutions, and death. And I wasn't trying to go anywhere of those places. So emotional maturity is not perfection. Discernment. I've talked to some of people about discernment this week. No, addiction does not care who you are. And the past experiences do help us. That's who I learned it from, and I grew from it. Yeah. Thank you, Robbie. So this is a strong teaching. Discernment is set up because stories help people recognize themselves without feeling lectured. And so that's what we're going to get into is story time now, because I've got like 12 minutes. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. So let's just take 3 deep breaths in and out right now to get calm. Close your eyes if you're in a place where it's nighttime now. Stories are persuasive, and we're always creating stories. See, that's the thing, is I thought that my imagination was my reality for a long time. That was one of the things I learned in therapy, because I would be catastrophizing and strategizing all the time. And my therapist is like, Stacy, can't you imagine good things happening? And I was like, I don't have an imagination. And she's like, oh, yes, you do. Oh, yes, you do. And so I had to learn how to turn my imagination the other way. The what if what I want happens, and then if you listen, I listened and read all kinds of books, hoping my life would change just through picking up those books. I had to get out there and practice and develop my character. Practice and develop. I couldn't just read about the characters in books, but certainly relating to the characters in books helped me a great deal. That's right. You're right, Naranja. Exactly. So let's get ready. Let's take a deep breath in. We'll breathe again after, don't worry. And we'll do the deeper breaths and then release. Breathe. And release. Good deal, Naranja. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, if you find that this was interesting, if you'd want to hear more of this, then please feel free to subscribe. Share it if you think it will help somebody else. Breathe in. And release. I know I don't let Grinch out right now because I'm dressed. I don't want Grinch to poop on me right now or fight with me. So Grinch, I wanted to put makeup on, and Grinch doesn't like me to put makeup on. I know, I love you too. That was the Grinch telling me love you. Did y'all hear that? Grinch, I know I love you too. The Grinch tells me Happy Mother's Day. So the adventure back to self, the little girl. We're going to talk about the little girl at first. And I got a little boy, so if you're a guy, hang in here. A little girl grows up in a home where her father struggles with addiction. He's emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, and unpredictable. Some days he's present, and some days he's withdrawn, distracted, or emotionally absent. She loves him deeply, but she never knows which version of him she's going to get. Her mother is codependent, emotionally overwhelmed, and deeply affected by her father's behaviors. The mother leans emotionally on the daughter far more than a child is meant to hold. Okay, so then the little girl begins learning very early that her role is not simply to be a child. She watches her mother carefully. She notices her sadness, her frustration, and pain, and she feels responsible for cheering her mother up, comforting her, making her smile, and carrying emotional burdens that were never hers to carry. She learns to become strong early. She learns to monitor moods. She learns to scan the room. She learns to anticipate conflict. She learns to listen for tension. She learns to wait for the other shoe to drop. She becomes highly emotionally aware of everyone except for herself. Inside, she feels insecure. She loves her father and longs for his attention, affection, and consistency. But because he's emotionally unavailable, she unconsciously learns that love feels uncertain. Love feels unpredictable. Love feels like longing. As she grows older, she does not understand why she continues attracted to emotional and unavailable men. She feels chemistry with inconsistency. She feels drawn to emotional distance because it feels familiar. She mistakes pursuit for love. She feels deeply unseen in relationships, but often works harder to be chosen. Her self-esteem remains fragile. She quietly believes her happiness is connected to whether a man chooses her, sees her, loves her, or validates her. This is my story I created today, Naraja, but I'll give you the titles of the books here at the end that I do read. She has learned that vulnerability feels dangerous. She doesn't want anybody to see her pain. She hides it beneath strength, caretaking, competence, and emotional endurance. She becomes the woman everybody depends on while privately feeling empty, exhausted, and unseen. Now, some of you guys may have related with that, but here comes the little boy. The little boy grows up with a father who's emotionally hard on him. His father believes strength means emotional suppression. He teaches the boy, don't cry, toughen up, be a man, stop being weak. When the boy becomes emotional, sensitive, frustrated, or hurt, he is criticized or shamed. The boy begins learning that vulnerability is unsafe, and he senses deep inside that he is special, capable, and intelligent. He knows there's something meaningful within him, but he struggles to access that confidence because he constantly feels like he does not measure up. He wants his father's approval. He wants to be enough. He tries sports, hoping that achievement will finally make him feel worthy. But instead, he feels inadequate. He compares himself to the other boys and feels like he falls short. He experiences subtle bullying and social rejection. He feels emotionally exposed and vulnerable. So he develops another strategy. He becomes funny. He becomes a class clown. Humor becomes armor. And if people are laughing, maybe they won't see his pain. If he's entertaining, maybe he will feel accepted. If he stays funny, maybe no one will notice how insecure he feels. He learns to perform rather than reveal. He learns to distract others from his vulnerability. Inside, he feels stressed, frustrated, lonely, and emotionally disconnected. And then to adulthood, this is how this goes. Hello, Mr. Summonveer. It's good to see you this morning. So in adulthood, both children grow up carrying their childhood adaptations into adult life. The young woman enters relationships where she feels unseen, overlooked, and emotionally neglected. She overfunctions in her home, her marriage, parenting, and relationships. She does more, gives more, tolerates more, and asks for less. She fears being a burden. She struggles to identify her own needs. She confuses love with obligation. She believes if she gives enough, proves enough, and sacrifices enough, she will finally feel chosen. But she remains emotionally depleted. The young man grows into a highly responsible adult. He believes his worth is tied to what he does for others. He overfunctions in marriage. He feels responsible for fixing problems, providing solutions, and carrying emotional and practical burdens. He struggles to identify his own emotional needs. He confuses responsibility with intimacy. Thank you, Mr. Summerveer. I appreciate that. He believes love is earned through effort and usefulness. He believes love is earned through effort and usefulness. Both enter codependent relationships. Both become caretakers. Both abandon themselves in the process of trying to secure love, stability, and belonging. Neither understands that they are still unconsciously repeating childhood patterns. The turning point is eventually both reach emotional exhaustion. Life is no longer working the way it once did. Their coping strategies begin failing them. One day, one is walking into the coach's office and the other is walking out. Two adult children. Two nervous systems shaped by childhood survival. Two people beginning to ask deeper questions. Why do I keep repeating these patterns? Why do I abandon myself? Why do I struggle with boundaries? Why do I feel responsible for everyone? And why do I confuse being needed with being loved? Both begin learning something new, not becoming someone else, remembering who they are before their survival patterns became their identity. They began learning boundaries, emotional awareness, nervous system regulation, self-worth, communication, new identification, and self-respect. They begin separating appreciation from obligation. They begin learning they can care deeply without carrying what is not theirs. They begin what I call the adventure back to self. Because healing is not about becoming someone new. Healing is remembering who you are underneath what you created to survive. This weekend story, we explored how childhood roles can become adult patterns, adult relational patterns. A little girl raised with addiction and codependency learns over responsibility, emotional caretaking, hypervigilance, and insecurity. A little boy raised with emotional criticism learns performance, emotional suppression, humor as armor, and overfunctioning. Both grow into adult children carrying unresolved patterns into adult relationships. Both confuse love with responsibility. Both struggle with boundaries, self-worth, and authentic communication. Both eventually begin the adventure back to self. And this is where we now transition into next week, what we're going to talk about next week. Next week, we'll begin focusing more intentionally on boundaries, self-worth, communication, emotional responsibility, needs identification, obligation versus appreciation, self-abandonment, and authentic connection. We'll begin exploring that important distinction. So appreciation versus yes, boundaries. I know so many people want to hear about boundaries. So I'm going to say just a few things and then we're going to breathe, darlings. Is appreciation versus obligation. As many people with trauma histories and codependent patterns confuse obligation with love. They give from guilt, serve from fear, overfunction from anxiety, caretake from hyper responsibility. This is not the same as healthy love. I know I miss John London too. I hope he's okay. Thank you very much, Robbie. Thank you. All right, so this is not the same as healthy love. Appreciation says I choose freely. Obligation says I do this because I fear what will happen if I don't. So boundaries help us understand the difference. Boundaries are not punishment. Boundaries are not rejection. Boundaries are clarity. Boundaries help us stop carrying what was never ours to hold. As we close this week, I want to remind you, healing is not becoming someone else. Healing is remembering who you are underneath all the adaptations, the defenses, the addiction patterns, and the survival strategies. So let's breathe, darlings, because I got to go to breakfast. I get to go to breakfast, okay? So here we grow. So breathe in to freedom. Boundaries give you more freedom. It's not about controlling somebody. Boundaries are healthy love. So let's breathe it in, some healthy love and just love. You are love. You don't need to find that outside of yourself. It's inside. So that's what you need to find is the love inside yourself. So breathe it in. And then we're going to hold it for 4 seconds if you can, but if not, just do your best and then release. We're going to do it 5 times. Thank you. So let's take a deep breath in. Hold it. Release. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. Breathe. Hold it. Release. Just 2 more. Notice what you hear and how you feel. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. Last one. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Thank you all so much for being here this morning and for, Mother's Day wishes and wishing, those around you happy Mother's Day, the divine feminine in all of us. I want to thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time for our Monday Night Live. So I look forward to seeing you then. And if you want one-on-one thanks, Robbie, I will. If you want one-on-one sessions with me, or you want to join, my workshop, the Unbound Self, or you want to try my Self-Trust Reset program, an intensive 3-month program, my email is in the description. Thank y'all so much. Thank you, beautiful. I appreciate you. Thank you for moderating, Kim, and you have a wonderful weekend and happiest Mother's Day to you. Love you, darling. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate you.